The Xerion Tribunal's crystalline chambers hummed with tension as High Arbiter Velthan's 6 eyes fixed upon the impossible data streaming across the holo displays. For 7 centuries, the Galactic Archive had listed Sol 3 as a cleansed world, a sterile monument to the Third Purge, when the hegemony had wiped out humanity for their dangerous unpredictability. Impossible, whispered Conciliar Mix Wharton, his tentacles trembling as he processed the readings. The energy signatures? They're not just active, they're organized. The signal had begun 3 rotations ago, a mathematical sequence so elegant it could only be artificial, yet so complex it made their finest quantum computers weep in binary. It pulsed from the dead system like a heartbeat, growing stronger with each transmission. Perhaps some automated system finally activated, offered tactical assessor Quilth Vex, though her confidence wavered. Ancient machinery responding to stellar radiation patterns. Velthan's mandibles clicked dismissively. Run the pattern. Through linguistic matrices. All of them. The results materialized in seconds, and the chamber fell silent. The pattern wasn't random, it was a message, broadcast in 17 different extinct languages, each belonging to species the hegemony had eliminated for being evolutionarily problematic. At its core, repeated in mathematical constants that predated faster than light travel was a simple phrase. We remember. We return. We judge. Commander Ixelfost materialized via hologram, his scaled features grim. High Arbiter, our deep space monitors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the Sol system. Whatever's happening there, it's big. How? Big! Velthan's voice carried the weight of authority that had condemned 1,000 worlds. Dyson-scale big. They're harvesting stellar energy at rates that shouldn't be possible. Our analysts estimate they're pulling enough power to fuel a galactic civilization in 3 days. The implications hit the chamber like a photon storm. Humanity wasn't just alive. They had surpassed every technological projection the hegemony had ever calculated. The species they'd tried to exterminate as primitively dangerous had evolved beyond their comprehension. Recall all fleets from the Outer Rim, Velthan ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his circulatory system. Full mobilization. Omega-level threat protocols. Sir, Quilth Vex interjected. Perhaps diplomacy. Diplomacy? Velthan's laugh was like grinding metal. We glassed their world, Assessor. We turned their children to vapor and their cities to radioactive sand. We broadcast it across the galaxy as a lesson to other species who might dare to think beyond their designated roles. His 6 eyes narrowed to points of cold light. There will be no diplomacy. As the hegemony's war machine began its inexorable mobilization, none of them considered that humanity might have spent 7 centuries not just surviving, but learning. Learning about the galaxy that had tried to murder them. Learning about the species that had cheered their extinction. Learning about justice from teachers who had forgotten what the word meant. In the void between stars, something vast and patient felt their preparations and smiled with 10 billion voices. The children of Earth were coming home, 732 light-years from the Sol system, aboard the hegemony dreadnought Eternal Dominion. Fleet Marshal Keth Harik studied tactical projections that made no sense. His career had spanned 4 centuries of conquest, and he'd never encountered readings like these. Show me the Sol system again, he commanded, his carapace clicking against the command throne. The holographic display materialized, but instead of the dead star system they expected to find, it showed something impossible. Vast structures orbited, Sol in perfect geometric harmony, not built, but grown, as if space itself had been convinced to take new shapes. Ribbons of captured starlight flowed between massive installations that dwarfed anything in hegemony space. Energy output analysis confirms it, Marshal, reported Science Primus Jektal, her voice tight with professional disbelief. They're not just harvesting solar radiation. They're manipulating stellar fusion at the quantum level. The star itself has become their reactor. Keth Harrick's forearms twitched involuntarily. Population estimates? That's unclear. We're detecting no individual life signs, but the quantum resonance suggests billions of entities in some form of distributed consciousness. They might be networked, Marshall, hive-minded. Better. Hive minds are predictable. But even as he spoke, Keth Harrick felt the lie in his own words. Nothing about this felt predictable. The first probe ships had vanished without trace. No debris, no distress signals, simply there one moment and gone the next. The second wave had managed to transmit for exactly 0.003 seconds before suffering. The same fate. The third wave never launched. Their crews had refused orders, claiming existential dread when approaching the system boundary. Marshall interrupted communications Nexus Vrildan. We're receiving a transmission. Origin. Sol system. It's addressed to you personally. The hologram flickered and reformed. A figure appeared, unmistakably human in shape, but wrong in every detail that mattered. Its skin held depths like folded space, its eyes contained, swirling galaxies, and when it spoke, its voice harmonized with itself across multiple octaves. Fleet Marshal Keth Harrick of the Hegemony War Caste, it said, and somehow it knew his name despite never having met. I am Kale Nerion, speaker for the aggregate. We greet you as one warrior to another. Keth Harrick's training overcame his shock. I am Marshal of the Hegemony's Third Armada. You will surrender your system for judicial examination. The being that called itself Kale Nerion smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed infinite sadness and infinite threat in equal measure. You misunderstand your position, Marshal. You are not here to judge us. We have returned to judge you. By what authority? Keth Harrick began. By the authority of 10 billion voices silenced. By the authority of children who never drew breath. By the authority of species rendered extinct for the crime of being inconvenient. The figure's voice grew layered, as if thousands spoke in unison. We are humanity, evolved beyond your capacity to destroy. We are every race you have erased, preserved in quantum memory and digital soul. We are the universe's long-delayed justice. The hologram gestured, and suddenly the tactical displays showed something that turned Keth Harrick's ichor to ice. His overwhelming armada of 50,000 ships was surrounded. Humanity's constructs had somehow appeared in formation around every vessel simultaneously, not by traveling faster than light, but by folding space itself. We offer you the same mercy you offered our children, Kale Nerion continued. None. The transmission ended, leaving the command deck in absolute silence. Across the galaxy, Hegemony monitoring stations registered the same impossible event simultaneously. The instantaneous appearance of human constructs in orbit around every major Hegemony world. Not ships in any recognizable sense, but geometric impossibilities that hurt to perceive directly. Structures that existed in more dimensions than the eye could follow. On Zerion Prime, capital of the Hegemony, chaos erupted across all levels of government. High Arbiter Velthon found himself staring at his personal communication array, which had activated without authorization and now displayed a message that made his exoskeleton crack with stress fractures. Velthon of the Zerion. Tribunal. You were present at the Sol cleansing. You cast the deciding vote. We remember. The message was signed with symbols that predated known civilization. Mathematical proofs that somehow conveyed meaning beyond mere numbers. They spoke of entropy and order, of lives taken and balances that demanded settling. In the lower city, panic spread as citizens looked up to see vast shadows passing overhead. The constructs didn't attack. They simply were, hanging in the sky like a promise of judgment. But their mere presence caused something unprecedented. In Hegemony space, doubt. How did they get here so fast? Demanded Sub-Arbiter Lix Korun, his normally perfect composure cracking. Our fleets are still 3 systems away from Sol. They didn't travel here, Velthon replied, studying classified reports from across the galaxy. According to quantum resonance analysis, they've been here the entire time. Somehow they've been watching us for centuries. The implications were staggering. If humanity had possessed this level of technology for centuries, why reveal themselves now? Why wait 700 years to strike back? The answer came from an unexpected source, archivist Pel Zara, the tribunal's keeper of extinct species records. Her ancient form trembled as she approached the High Arbiter's dais, clutching a EO data tablet that glowed with archival light. High Arbiter, she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of forbidden knowledge. I've been analyzing the human transmission patterns. They're not just using their own language, they're speaking for every species we've eliminated. The Keth Malori, mathematical poems, the Yin-Therat harmonic legal codes, the Dorashali philosophical proofs, they've preserved them all. Velthon's 6 eyes focused with laser intensity. Explain. The humans didn't just survive our cleansing. They've been collecting our victims. Every species we've eliminated, they've somehow preserved their consciousness, their culture, their desire for justice. They've become a living archive of our crimes. As if summoned by her words, every screen in the tribunal chamber activated simultaneously. The being called Kael'Nerian appeared, but now it was accompanied by others, figures that represented every extinct species in the hegemony's bloody history. They stood in ranks stretching beyond the horizon, a parliament of the dead demanding their day in court. Citizens of the Zerion hegemony, Kael'Nerian spoke, its voice now carrying harmonics that touched every frequency capable of conveying meaning. For 1,000 years, you have positioned yourselves as judges of which species deserve to exist. You have eliminated any civilization that showed signs of surpassing your understanding, any culture that dared to question your authority, any race that possessed the audacity to grow beyond your control. The image shifted, showing the tribunal chamber where they now sat. Velthon realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just transmitting. They were present, watching through means that bypassed every security protocol the hegemony possessed. Today, the Court of Universal Justice is in session. We are the prosecution, the jury, and the evidence. The hegemony stands accused of crimes against evolution itself. The transmission paused, and in that silence, every being in the galaxy felt the weight of judgment settling upon their shoulders like a shroud woven from the voices of the dead. The Galactic Assembly had never been designed for a moment like this. Representatives from across hegemony space found themselves seated in their ancient parliamentary chamber, but the rules of engagement had fundamentally changed. Where once the hegemony's military might had ensured compliance, now vast human constructs hung motionless above every world, patient as gravity and twice as inevitable. Kael'Nerian materialized not as a hologram, but as a physical presence that somehow occupied multiple locations simultaneously. Around the assembly floor, other figures appeared. The preserved consciousnesses of extinct species, each representing civilizations that had been judged unworthy by hegemony standards. This assembly recognizes no human authority, declared High Arbiter Velthon, though his voice carried none of its usual commanding presence. You are the survivors of a justly condemned species. Justly condemned. The interruption came not from Kael'Nerian, but from a figure of living crystal, a preserved Lumi Scythe consciousness, one of the first species the hegemony had eliminated 3 millennia ago. We created art from starlight itself. Our crime was beauty that surpassed your understanding. Another voice joined, this one from a being of flowing energy patterns, a Vex Thanari mathematician whose people had been erased for developing paradox-based logic systems. We offered to share knowledge that could have lifted all species to higher existence. Our crime was generosity that threatened your control. One by one, representatives of the dead spoke their truths. Each species had been eliminated not for aggression or conquest, but for the sin of transcendence, for growing beyond the hegemony's ability to contain and control them. Narration raised a hand, and the testimonies paused. Honored delegates, you sit in judgment of your own judges. For millennia, you have accepted the hegemony's authority to determine which species deserve existence. Today, we present evidence that this authority was never legitimate. The chamber's central display activated, showing historical records that should have been classified beyond any security level. Fleet movements, tribunal decisions, private communications between hegemony leaders, all laid bare with devastating clarity. The Zephyrian Collective, Narration continued as images flowed across the displays. Eliminated for developing technology that could terraform dead worlds. The official record states they posed a resource allocation threat. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many delegates had never seen the true reasons behind the hegemony's protective actions. The more Daleth symbiosis, more images flowed. Eliminated for achieving perfect harmony between different species. The official record cites dangerous precedent for hierarchical dissolution. The pattern became undeniable. Every extinct species had been destroyed, not for the good of galactic order, but to prevent examples of alternative ways of existing, ways that might inspire other species to question hegemony supremacy. And humanity? Naration's voice grew. Quiet, forcing the entire assembly to lean forward. Eliminated for asking a single question. Why must it be this way? The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in galactic history, the assembled delegates of the hegemony were seeing themselves not as protectors of order, but as enforcers of stagnation. Ambassador Krex Tal of the Outer Rim Consortium slowly stood, his normally proud, bearing diminished. If what you show is true, then we have been complicit in genocide, completed Narration simply. The systematic elimination of evolution itself. You have turned the galaxy into a museum of your own limitations. What do you want? Velthan's question came out as barely a whisper. The human consciousness smiled, and for a moment it looked, heartbreakingly, like the species they had once been. Curious, hopeful, infinitely diverse. We want what every extinct species wanted, the right to grow, to change, to become something greater than we were yesterday. The trial had only just begun, but already the verdict was becoming clear. The evidence phase of humanity's trial lasted 17 standard days, and with each revelation, the foundation of galactic civilization cracked a little deeper. Species after species presented their cases, not through advocacy, but through the simple presentation of what they had become in the moments before their extinction. The Cathara had achieved immortality through crystalline consciousness transfer, only to be eliminated as disruptive to natural cycles. Their preserved representative, Eshkethal, demonstrated the technology live, transferring her awareness through a dozen different crystalline matrices while maintaining perfect continuity of thought. The nomadic Velkarai had solved faster than light, travel without technology, evolving the ability to step between quantum states at will. Their representative, Fluxinger Morvanai, appeared and disappeared across the assembly chamber, showing the delegates travel methods that made their crude jump drives look like stone knives. Most disturbing of all were the empathic Trivanayal, whose crime had been developing true telepathic unity while maintaining individual identity. When their representative, 3 who are 1, Listal Varen, spoke, every delegate in the chamber felt their emotions directly. The grief of genocide, the pain of erasure, but also the beauty of consciousness shared without conquest. You feel what we felt, Lys Talvarin said, as delegates wept openly, experiencing empathy at a level their species had never evolved. Not just our death, but our love for existence itself. We were not eliminated for being dangerous. We were eliminated for being better. By the trial's end, even the hegemony's staunchest supporters sat in stunned silence. The weight of 1,000 extinctions pressed down upon the assembly like a collapsed star. High Arbiter Velthan finally spoke, his voice hollow. "What is your verdict?" Narration stood, but now the assembled delegates could see the truth behind the human representative's form. It wasn't one consciousness, but billions. Every human who had died in the soul cleansing, every extinct species preserved in quantum memory, every dream that had been murdered in the name of stability. Guilty, the merged consciousness said, simply. Guilty of the greatest crime possible, the deliberate prevention of evolution itself. And the sentence? Velthan asked, though he already knew the answer would reshape everything. The sentence is justice. The hegemony ends today, not through conquest, not through destruction, but through obsolescence. Narration gestured, and the chamber's displays showed something that made several delegates faint from shock. Across the galaxy, on every world, every ship, every space station, the same phenomenon was occurring. Hegemony technology was simply stopping, not breaking down, not being destroyed, but peacefully deactivating as if it had decided its time was over. We are not conquerors, Narration explained, as emergency lighting flickered on throughout the chamber. We are gardeners. For 7 centuries we have prepared for this moment, not to destroy you, but to free you from the prison you built around yourselves. You're stranding us, protested Ambassador Krextal. Without our technology, our civilization will collapse. Your civilization was already dead, replied one of the Lumiscythe representatives. It died the moment you chose stagnation over growth. We're simply clearing away the corpse. But Narration raised a hand for silence. You will not be abandoned. Every species that chooses growth over control, evolution over dominance, will receive what they need to transcend their current limitations. Those who cling to the old ways of thinking will find that the universe no longer supports their ambitions. The human consciousness looked directly at Velthan. The age of judges is over. The age of becoming has begun. As if to emphasize the point, several delegates began to shimmer with an inner light, their consciousness expanding, their awareness deepening as humanity's gift of transcendence took hold. The revolution had begun not with weapons, but with possibilities. 1 year, after the trial of civilizations, the galaxy bore little resemblance to its former self. Where once rigid hierarchies had enforced cosmic stagnation, now a flowering of consciousness bloomed across 1 trillion worlds. On Zerion Prime, former High Arbiter Velthan stood in what had once been the Tribunal's highest tower, now converted into a learning nexus where beings from across the galaxy came to study the art of transcendence. His 6 eyes, once instruments of judgment, now saw patterns of beauty in the quantum dance of evolving consciousness. I don't understand how you can forgive us, he said to the human consciousness that had become known as the Shepherd, the merged awareness of humanity and all the species they had preserved. The Shepherd's form had evolved beyond physical representation, existing now as a presence that touched minds directly. Forgiveness assumes there was something to forgive. You were playing the role the universe needed you to play, the obstacle that would force growth through resistance. Through the tower's crystal walls, Velthan could see the transformations occurring across his world. Zerion children played with living light constructs that had been gifted by the Lumiscythe consciousness. Zerion artists collaborated with Vexithanari mathematicians to create sculptures from crystallized possibility. Where once his species had enforced uniformity, now they celebrated infinite diversity. The trivenale gift is the most difficult for us, Veltan admitted. True empathy, feeling others' emotions as our own. My species spent millennia learning to suppress such connections. And yet, the shepherd observed gently, your crime statistics have fallen to zero since accepting it. When you feel another's pain as your own, causing harm becomes impossible. Similar transformations had occurred across the galaxy. The militaristic Kethvel had discovered the Cathera gift of consciousness transfer and used it to experience existence from their former enemies' perspectives. The resource-hoarding Mixcorian had accepted the Zephyrian terraforming knowledge and turned their worlds into gardens that sustained rather than consumed. Not every species had adapted. The Rixthanal Empire had rejected all offers of transcendence and found their technology increasingly unreliable, their worlds slowly quarantined by space itself until they chose isolation over growth. The hegemony's most fanatical adherents had fled to the galaxy's edge, where they maintained pocket civilizations based on the old hierarchical models. But even there, their children increasingly asked dangerous questions about why things had to be the way they were. There's something I need to know, Velthan said finally. Could you have done this from the beginning? When your species first encountered us, could you have simply forced this transformation then? The shepherd's presence grew contemplative. Yes. But forced growth isn't growth at all. It's merely another form of control. Every species, including humanity, had to choose transcendence freely. The 7 centuries of exile weren't punishment. They were preparation. We needed to become gardeners, not conquerors. And if we had chosen differently? If we had rejected your gifts entirely? Then you would have had that right. Free will, even the freedom to choose limitation, is sacred. But consciousness seeks growth the way plants seek sunlight. Given true alternatives, beings tend to choose expansion over restriction. The conversation was interrupted by a chime from the Nexus's central chamber. New students had arrived, young beings from across the galaxy, their minds bright with possibility, eager to learn not just what they could become, but what they could help others become. Velthan watched them with something approaching wonder. A garden of infinite tomorrows, he murmured. Yes, agreed the shepherd, and we've only just begun to plant the seeds. Above them, structures that had once enforced galactic law now served as nodes in a vast network of consciousness, carrying not commands, but conversations, the endless dialogue of a billion species learning to grow together. In the spaces between stars, new forms of existence sparked into being, birthed from the marriage of imagination and possibility. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as gardeners of consciousness itself, and in a galaxy finally free to evolve. Every dawn brought new wonders that no single species could have imagined alone. The age of judges had ended, the age of becoming stretched ahead like an infinite sunrise, beautiful and strange and full of promise. In the quantum depths, where thought becomes reality, the voice of 10 billion extinct species whispered in harmony. We remember, we return, we grow,